energy is going to ebb and flow, right? Like there's been years that I am so thankful and energized to be in this seat. There's been years that it's been more challenging, right? And it's just like, how do you continue the journey, and make sure you're also the right person?
Welcome to Financial Freestyle here on Yahoo Finance, and I'm your host, Ross Mack. And look, no matter where you are in your financial journey, you can never stop learning. And that's why I'm talking to some of the most influential people in the financial world, and today is no different, as I'm talking to the CEO and co-founder of Cleancult, Ryan Lupberger. Ryan, how you doing, man? Thanks so much for joining us.
Doing good. Thanks for having me today.
Man, I truly appreciate, one, what you're doing, and two, I appreciate you coming on. But to the world, who is Ryan?
So my name is Ryan from Colorado, originally born and raised in Boulder, Colorado. So always been natural products, crunchy, you say what you will. Live in New York City now. Started a household cleaning business almost 8-9 years ago now. And we are the first company in the world to put soap in a milk carton instead of a plastic bottle. So who am I? Passionate about getting rid of plastic, passionate about the environment, passionate about how do we solve kind of big social issues with capitalism, and really happy to be here today.
You know what's interesting about that is like the intersection of capitalism and we can call it environmentalism or just doing good for the world. How do you balance both? Especially a person that takes in money from investors, right? While simultaneously still trying to have that compass and try to balance it the right way. Like, how do you find that?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey, right? So like personally, you already heard, born and raised in Colorado, right? Grew up and actually went to a company called the Unreasonable Institute. And think about like Y Combinator, right? What they do for tech businesses on the West Coast. They're an incubator accelerator. This is that for better for the world businesses, right? So they take businesses that are trying to solve massive problems like hunger or poverty, all these different big problems and support it, but they all have to be for profit, right? So example, there was a big mango seed recycler in Nigeria that if they recycled the mango seeds, it was 70% the cost of chicken feed, right? And they
Mm.
were able to recycle it. It was just beautiful kind of circular economy. So for me, I think the right opportunities, they work in tandem, and that's what we're doing here, right? So like 9 years ago now, I looked at the back of my bottle of laundry detergent, 2016, didn't see any ingredients listed, right? And I was Boulder kid at that time. Why aren't there ingredients in the back of our cleaning products? Just went down this rabbit hole about like how crazy regulation is here, how crazy the industry is. And was just saw so much plastic, right? So we thought we could do a better cleaning product without the plastic at the same price and marry again, like real growth, but value at the same time. And that's kind of how this came to be. So I think it's possible. It's challenging, but possible.
So I've had many founders on this show, and I love asking the question of like, what makes a good company, right? Some people, it's like maybe you're disrupting the industry or maybe you're solving a problem. But clearly, right, I think you found something you're passionate about, that being the environment, something sustainable. But now you went from just kind of an idea, you have a patent on it. Like, help us get through like one, how did you get to this idea? And more importantly, how did you see it materialize and now to
Yeah.
having such success?
Yeah, I think like we live by two values, and I didn't coin this term, but it's like endurance and optimization, right? So 7, 8, 9 years ago now, we said, hey, I think there's a problem with plastic and clean ingredients. And I was like, okay, great. So then we really took 2 years to understand like what are the solutions in the market. And then those 2 years we said, I'm not really happy with the solutions. Like, okay, can we do it better? Right. So then we
Mhm.
said 2 years, okay, I think we can do it better. How do we launch it to market? And really for the first 3 or 4 years, we were an online business, right? All direct to consumer, proving out the brand, the technology, our suppliers, right? That people would actually buy cleaners and, we believe we're the
Mhm.
best formulations in the game, but they buy it online, right? We didn't know if people would buy cleaning products in a carton, right? Then in 2022, we said, okay, we've proved this out enough, right? People get the product that we're able to fundraise, right? So we closed our Series A and Series B, and we said, okay, this is working. How do we take this to mass market retail, right? So we started in Walmart. That was our first big retail partner. Then just kind of rolled it out year by year, right? So 2024, we rolled out in Kroger, Albertsons, Safeways, Wegmans, Harris Teeter. And this year we actually launched nationwide in Costco and Target. We have another big launch this summer.
What?
So I think like it's complicated, but it's not, it's just like one foot in front of the other, continuing to focus on the customers that matter, continuing to listen to the consumers, and just endurance and optimization is what we believe.
You know what I love? Obviously, we spoke a little off camera, but I love how you said, my company is a 10-year overnight success. And so kind of let's talk about how you got to where you are, but more importantly, kind of, I guess, catching the right place, right time, especially as consumers are becoming more eco-conscious, right? Let's actually talk about one, like what's the true problem you're solving, right? To the person that, if you're taking this home, if there's only one sound bite from this, one, why is what you're doing important, but two, like kind of what's like from a statistics standpoint, like how, eco-conscious are consumers becoming?
So for us, we don't want to go after this dark green consumer. We want to be the mass product, right? How can we get
Mhm.
the conventional cleaning product, the normal hand soap, the normal dish soap, and meet that level of efficacy at the exact same price, but be without the guilt of plastic, right? So it's taken
Okay.
again a long time to do that. So we're $4.99 in our filled and refillable aluminum bottles, and then seven
Wow.
ninety nine in our milk carton refills. So it's really the same price as. But again, it's taken a long time to get there. So we're trying to solve this plastic problem, but in a way that doesn't just fit for the really hyper eco-conscious person out there.
And so why does this problem exist, right? Is plastic cheaper than kind of your current packaging? Like help us understand why this problem even exists and why aren't other major brands doing it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's also like where systems and how they've been invented and compounded, right? Like the truth is, plastic is a really, really good material, right? It is flexible, it is durable, it can go through big supply chains, it's cheap, you can get every shape you want, right? So again, 30, 40 years ago, when we had this real like explosion of plastic, it's because it's a really good material, right? Like flat out. But the downside, it's petroleum based. It's really hard to recycle and doesn't have much, if any, end of life value. And there's a really big problem now that we have with it, right? The plastics in the ocean, microplastics on our home, microplastics on our person. So no one really thought about the downstream effects of this historically really good material. Um, so that's why, right? Is that like no one thought about that when they were inventing these new systems. And now it's really hard to switch, right? Because they are so easy and so affordable. So for us, for example, these guys are aluminum bottles. You start with a filled aluminum bottle, just like your leading brands. That's a lot lower margin than plastic bottles, right? But we do it so that we can get that person into our system and then use our cartons that are similar priced, right? So it's about the same
Nice.
margin for us and for the retailers. So, you know, we hope that we're not gonna be the only one, right? And this is gonna adopt
Yeah.
in body wash and shampoo and conditioner and, like, how do we remove all these categories? But it's gonna take a long time to shift this back to what we think is possible.
What you're doing is remarkable. But look, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we're back, we'll have more with Ryan of Cleancult. Welcome back to Financial Freestyle, where we're talking to Ryan Lupberger, CEO and co-founder of Cleancult. Now, listen, Ryan, I'll be remiss if I just let us kind of go without me having to actually touch on something. Earlier, you said, right, and I was kind of talking about, why your company exists. But one of the things you said was like, yeah, plastic is this and that, and then you might recycle it, and it probably won't even get recycled. You got to expound on that. So you're telling me when I put a lot of my things in recycling, it doesn't get recycled?
Yeah, so the industry has obviously lobbied or, marketed to us for many years that things get recycled when they just don't usually, right? So depending on the material stream, because every plastic is different, it's only about 5 to 7% of plastics get recycled, right? And there's all these reasons why, but 9 out of 10 times, it's not going to go back, right? Because even if you're putting in that blue bin and it ends up to your recycling facility, they sometimes don't know what to do with it, right? Because they used to have markets over in Asia and China to recycle it, that doesn't accept it anymore, right? So like literally that bottle, even if it goes blue, even if you're a responsible municipality, unfortunately, probably won't get recycled back into the stream.
That's crazy. But another thing you said, right? I'll be remiss. You talked about, raising your Series A and Series B. And I think to some of our entrepreneurial viewers, I think it's important to one, understand that process. So, right, early on, let's kind of help walk us into the process of going from idea and then going to actual business and then also raising capital. So going to ventures and then, ultimately scaling. Like, how's that
Yeah.
process?
Yes, we almost had like 4 steps of funding, right? So very first step, it was like just pinching pennies. I started this at business school at Babson. So you had a lot of different, literally university funding programs, right? So depending on if you have any like student listeners, it's likely that there's 10, 15, 20, 30 grand of university dollars that they get for free, right? It's part of most schools,
Mhm.
right? That was early dollars. And then said, okay, we need more here. Where do we go? So we did Kickstart and Indiegogo, and that was another, 50, 100 grand. Let's get enough for manufacturing to get this product out there. But what didn't even scratch the surface, right? But we had some decent pre-orders, decent traction, right? Then we did what's called accelerators and incubators. So we did 3 Mass Challenge in Boston and actually moved the entire business to Puerto Rico, which is a totally other story because it was one of the only accelerators that actually accepted us, right? And they gave us about 100 grand of
Right.
grant funding to move the business there, right? And we partnered with the National Science Foundation called the NSF, called the SBIR funding to get another 250,000, right? And that was all grant funding, trying to like literally claw our way to a proof of concept to be able to raise more institutionally. Then we really spent a year and spun our wheels, like just could not fundraise, right? We more grants here and there, but couldn't get this thing off the ground until we had like one really credible angel investor. And I think that'd be my biggest recommendation is like find who your person in your category is, right? If you're a, let's call it matching platform or dating, you need someone that was a founder and or really good investor at Hinge, Bumble, or Tinder, right? If you're in consumer, right, find the person who has been successful, get them to invest, right? Because when they do, that's when
Mm,
they basically risk it for their network. So thankfully, we found Dave Heath, the CEO of Bombas Socks, very successful consumer business, who
nice.
was our first angel check, right? And it all kind of spiraled after that. Is after he invested, we de-risked for a lot of his angel community, who then de-risked for our Series A community, who then de-risked for our Series B community. So not to oversimplify it, but like it kind of all stemmed from the right first investor that then continued to compound in a big way.
That's fascinating. So now, right, you found your top angel, right? And now you're able to effectively leverage that to go out and, find other angels and other venture capitalists and investors and secondary offerings, et cetera. But now let's kind of talk about how you got into the major big box retailers, right? You mentioned Kroger, Walmart, Target. Like, help us understand that process and the good and the bad with that.
Yep. Yeah. So it's a whole new ecosystem because direct to consumer, you go on Facebook, you spin up an ad, right? You can be funny and creative and then sell the product and you ship the product. For me, that was really easy for me to understand. Retail was a whole different ballgame, right? And the Walmart meeting rooms, they are intentionally very small and you only have 20 minutes. So it's literally a hot
Yeah.
box and it's a high pressure new experience intentionally so the vendor is not strong in these negotiations, right? But I digress. But so for us, it's like where you start with the retailers. First, you have to be ready to be able to be in a retailer, right? Can you produce at scale? Do you have retail price points and give them the margin that they need, which is as little as 20, as much as 50%, depending on the category. right? So first it's like, are you ready to be in business? Because retail is much riskier than online business, right? Because we were talking off camera, you don't sell in retail, you're usually responsible for all of that inventory. So it's a really risky bet and you have to be ready for that stage. So then you say you're ready, you have the margins, you have the product, you have to figure out who to go to. And each of the retailers have what's called buyers, right? So if you're selling a cup or a blanket or, a natural food, natural drink, you'll have a buyer in that retailer that buys that category, right? Figure out who that buyer is. And they have a line review every year, right? So typically it's the summer. You fly out to Minneapolis or Bentonville, Arkansas, or Issaquah, Washington, or Boise, Idaho. So that was Albertsons, Walmart, Target, and Costco. And you meet with your buyer
Mhm.
and you make your pitch, right? This is who I am. This is
Nice.
why I think I deserve shelf space. This is what I can deliver to you as a category. And then 3 or 4 months later, they tell you whether you're in, and you have to start running around and making the product for the launch. Yeah, and then you're typically in for about a year, and then if you sell well, they'll expand you, and if you don't sell well, then they'll discontinue you.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you pitch and then you find out 4 months later. That's intense.
Wow. These long sales cycles. Yeah, that's why, like, it's a
Yeah,
longer
yeah,
for
that's
sure.
intense. All right, so here's something interesting, right? And I think a lot of our viewers have probably at some point watched Shark Tank. And anytime you see a person, you got Mark Cuban sitting there taking his notes, you say, "Oh, wait, you have a patent?" So let's talk about this patent, right? So with your patent, um, having a patent on your packaging, ultimately, like, what are other ways you have the ability to leverage that? Are you able to license that to other, brands that, obviously make cleaning products, or like kind of help us understand that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because there's two schools of thought here. One school of thought is do something easy now because it's easier now, but then it's a lot harder later because people copy you versus doing something hard up front, but then it's easier later because you have less competition, right? So like for us, our category, we're the only brand doing this, right? It's because you have to build all of your own machinery because you can't run a non-food product on a food machine. And all the cartons right now in this category, it's all food, right? So I can't run my hand soap on a juice machine because that juice machine can never be used again in juice, right? So
Mm.
we chose, intentionally or not, I don't know if we meant to do it originally, really, really hard problem for 4 years up front that has now become easier because there's not multiple carton brands that go into the retailer and pitch, right? We're it. So the
Mm.
alternative, again, something easily that you can manufacture up front. So for us, we have patents on the process, the machine, the filling, the
Mm.
temperatures, the bottom seals, the side seals. So to answer your question, like, yes, it's all there, but in the end, we're focused on making sure people love our cleaning product and it does just as well as the leading brand, right? So like all these new business lines you mentioned are definitely exciting and we're exploring them. But for us, like we want to be super focused right now and making sure we have the best hand soap in the market, the best laundry detergent. And then in the background, we're starting to explore the different options. So say not yet, but maybe soon.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
curious, right? Industry agnostic, right? Irrespective of kind of what the company is, what's one piece of advice you would give to any person looking to start a business?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what I was saying earlier is the way that our systems work today is not how they have to work, right? Like everything is changing, I think, so much quicker than we expect. Like literally 40 years ago, plastic did not used to exist, right? So I think that's my biggest advice is try to figure out really challenging problems and go back to historicals on how things used to operate and see how we could, again, adapt that to now and there's a lot of shifting, right? I mean, AI is obviously interesting. There's a lot of applications there. Supply chain is interesting. So again, there's just like it is, I think, easier now than ever to do this. And there's a lot of also like government grants and accelerators that support you on the way.
Nice. So clearly you've been doing this for 10 years, right? What would you say one of the biggest obstacles you've had to overcome? And what advice would you give to someone that's looking, like I say, to start that? Or what advice would you give to a person that's also experiencing some hardships?
Yeah. I think that the big two is like we still repeat it, it's simple, but like endurance and optimization, right? Like it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. I think it's many marathons. It's also like energy is gonna ebb and flow, right? Like there's been years that I am so thankful and energized to be in this seat. There's been years that it's been more challenging, right? And it's just like how do you continue the journey, and make sure you're also the right person for the seat. So think for me, it's like every day getting up, being passionate, doing this, but also always trying to improve. And I think that's what we've been able to then deliver where we are today. Um, and then I think it's also like not to be corny, but like figuring out the breaks you can take, right? So like I do a big motorcycle trip around a crazy country every year, right? So I did Mongolia last year, India the year before that. So
Wow.
like I do get away, try to disconnect, and then just work with people that make you happy. Work on a problem that is a fun problem to go after.
I love it. Well, listen, I'd be remiss if I'm talking to someone that is doing really well in CPG and I don't talk about tariffs. So obviously, right, we got a lot going on in tariffs. You know, would you say your business is isolated? How are you impacting, or how's it impacting you? And also, how are you navigating the tariff world?
Yeah, I think there is no, maybe strongly worded, but no consumer business that's fully isolated, right? Because, for example, we are made here in the US. Our bottles are made here, our cartons are made here, our juice is made here, our lines are made here. We call it juice, but our liquid so it's don't drink it. But you can. It's all made here. Even so, it's still using some international components that are currently tariffed, right? So
Mhm.
it's a challenging problem. I think, obviously the new announcements that were out earlier this week on the Chinese updates are going to help. I think it's going to mitigate a lot of the blowback. But for us, we don't have the luxury that some of the other brands do, right? So like you have Coca-Cola saying they're going to divert all of their aluminum volume to plastic bottles. We can't do that. We stand against plastic. So we're exploring how to mitigate it. We have a lot of
Mm,
different supply chain alternatives. We are getting impacted, and we're still trying to figure out how to handle that without taking price, right? And continuing to meet the shopper where at the lowest possible value.
that's strong. That's impressive. Well, listen, that's it for this episode, Ryan. I just really want to say thanks so much for joining us. This was a very insightful and obviously inspiring conversation. So I want to continue to wish you nothing but success. And that's it for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure that you like, subscribe, share this with your auntie and your cousins, your best friends, etc. And hit that QR code so you can get other podcasts on the network. And until then, see you guys next week. Make sure you like and subscribe. And this is Ross Mack of Financial Freestyle.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.